Hi there, this is Daniel, and this is the story of Daniel, a special episode called Two Tales. These are two stories that I wrote some time ago. They are part of an article I wrote back in 2010. When thinking of the story of Daniel, I wanted to tell stories that everyone would like and be able to relate with, like the ones I have so far. However, I wanted to tell the whole story about Daniel. I wanted to share events and history that some people, strike that, most people, would have never heard. These are two of those stories. I heard both from my mother. One I heard when I was very young, and she retold it to me more than once. The one about the Native American girl. The other one about my father, she told me later in life when I was 13 or 14. I asked my father about it, and he confirmed that what I'd been told was true. However, he indicated that there was more to the story than what I had heard. But he passed away before I ever heard any of the rest of this story. I'm considering a couple of more stories from the past. If these stories are well received and nobody gets upset or bothered by my telling, I will consider sharing even more of these histories of the Hanning family. I hope that you enjoy reading them, and if you find mistakes, please leave me a comment. I went over these two stories, but I'm very tired as of late, and I might have missed something. As always, thank you for your kindness and support. The first. A young Irish lad who had just arrived in New York via Ellis Island was working hard to learn to speak American. He was very happy with coming to America and becoming an American. It was 1929 and opportunity abounded in the city of New York for young men willing to work hard. Irish immigration had seen its difficulties, but most of that prejudice and those difficulties were part of a past he had not personally witnessed. Life was good for Oscar Hanning, and all that was lacking in his new life was a wife and a family of his own. One spring day, Oscar meets a vibrant and educated young woman from Germany. She was not like the lasses that he had met so far. Her name was Betty Schollenberg, and Oscar planned on asking for her hand in marriage. This is when Oscar's wonderful life in this new home took a turn that would change his life in unimaginable ways. You see, Betty was from a Jewish family, from Germany, and Oscar, well, he had been raised, as Irish boys are, Catholic. In the months that passed prior to the marriage, Oscar found himself without work and shunned by his family and friends, evicted by his landlord, and frequently harassed and even beaten by people he once knew as friends. Betty's life had taken a similar route, even though Oscar had agreed to and begun a conversion to Judaism. Betty's parents were steadfast against marriage to an outsider. They insisted that no Irish convert to Judaism could be a good husband for her or a father for her children. Her father forbade her from marrying Oscar Hanning, and her mother begged Betty to just find a nice Jewish boy from the neighborhood to marry and make her father happy. Well, this was paradoxical, because Oscar, through his studies, was actually finding his new faith fit him. As a boy, certain aspects of his Catholic faith had always confused him and created conflict. However, the Jewish people had come from a long and tortured past, but managed to keep a love and nurturing home and family. He found great wisdom and strength in what he learned in his studies of Judaism. Oscar was moved by the story of Abraham and Isaac, the birth of the Jewish people and the Hebrew nation, and he asked Betty to tell him the story again and again. Oscar took to wearing his yarmulke to worship and back. Oh, this proved to be a worse idea than Oscar had ever imagined. It was to be a dark night for Oscar. He was walking home from temple as thoughts of worship shifted to thoughts of a more corporal nature. His head became lost in thoughts of getting home and sitting down to dinner with Betty, a dinner that she was most likely making for him this very moment. Suddenly, there was a sharp pain in the back of his head, and he found himself on his knees grabbing the back of his now sore head. His vision was doubled, and then he heard a familiar voice. "Hey, Oscar, what you doing wearing that sissy hat?" Followed by even more familiar voice, that of his cousin. "Yeah, Oscar, what you doing with a kike hat on your head? Don't you know, little cousin? That's a sure way of getting your ass kicked." Oscar went to stand up and explain things to his cousin. He never got the chance. That night, two men that Oscar had been raised around crossed the Atlantic Ocean to chase a dream, and had loved as much as any good Irish son could, beat Oscar Hanning to within an inch of his life, then dumped him on the doorstep for his wife Betty, for her to find the next time she stepped outside to check on Oscar. Well, Oscar never wore his yarmulke again, to or from worship. But it didn't matter. This may have been the first beating Oscar survived at the hands of close friends and family, but it wouldn't be the last. How long ago it seemed when their lives were without conflict, but also without love. After 6 months of Oscar and Betty trying hard to make their relationship work with their family and friends, they decided things must change. 6 months of Betty fighting with her father and her holding her mother's hand as she cried at the thought of losing her only daughter to a bad marriage. 6 months of sparse work for Oscar and regular beatings for his betrayal of his Catholic faith. Oscar and Betty picked up and moved to Columbus, Ohio, to start life over and to raise their family. They had one son, Kenneth Urban Hanning, father of Kenny Ray Hanning, Daryl Keith Hanning, and Daniel Lewis Hanning. For the next 13 years, Oscar worked hard to fit into the world his love had guided him to. But even after moving to Columbus, his pain and suffering did not stop. Yes, the rabbi and the congregation accepted him as one of their own, but he never found his way to acceptance among the temple's elders. His love had brought him to a faith that separated him from his family, his identity, and his past. The only place that he felt truly at home was when he was at home with Betty and his new son Ken. The only place he could find work was making moonshine in tubs in the basement of his home. This new line of work did not mix well with Oscar's alcoholism, and soon his marriage and his relationship with his young son were lost in the battle. A battle that started with loving a woman of a different faith and ended in a shattered family and destroyed dreams. Brings us to the end of our first story. Now I'd like to just quickly segue into the second story, named, quite cleverly, The Second. The year is 1904. The location is a little-known place just outside Las Cruces, New Mexico, known as the Mescalero Apache Reservation. The still, turn-of-the-century night is broken by screams. They're not the screams of fright or fear. They are the screams that come with the birth of new life and the ending of another. On this night, a female child is born. Her name, Margaret Nora Gray. Her mother is an Apache Native American, born to the tribe's newest chief. Her father is a Dutch immigrant bricklayer. But all is not as it should be this night. Shortly after giving birth to a beautiful, glowing baby girl, her mother, and the daughter of the Apache Nation, dies, leaving Margaret without her mother, leaving her father without his wife and love. For the rest of his life, he cannot look upon Margaret without seeing his now dead bride. This taints their relationship for life. Margie, as she has become known, finds herself a child of two different and often warring worlds. Being raised by her paternal grandmother, Margaret is not allowed to visit the reservation just outside of town, where she was born. She longs to know her mother and her mother's people. To know them, she understands, is to better know herself. Her father is away with work much of the time, and she is left in the care of her elderly paternal grandmother. Margie is raised as a white girl. She is told not to speak of her real mother or where she was born. She is made to wear frilly patterned dresses, but she longs to wear the clothes like the girls she sees from the reservation. She listens to the jazz and the big bands on the radio, but she deeply longs to hear the drums and songs of her people. She also quickly learns of the white people's hatred and distrust of Native Americans and the Apache. Margie sees how the Apache people are treated by shopkeepers, how they are not allowed in many stores, and watched and monitored in those they are allowed to shop. Humiliated and spat upon in the streets, and thought of by most white Americans as drunken redskins or horse-stealing Indians. At a very young age, Margie understands how important it is for her to keep her little secret. People in her town think of her as a white woman, and Margie knows it is best to keep it that way. Still, she deeply longs to know of her mother and her other family. Then Margie learns in school, white man's school, of the massacre of her people, the loss of their native lands, and she reads of each victory for the white man. She recoils in pain and confusion. There is no one in her life but her elderly grandmother to ask about what she is learning in school. Well, she tries asking her grandmother, and her grandmother tells her that them Injuns deserve to die. They are all savages. Didn't believe in God or the Lord Jesus Christ. Best you give it no never mind. That does not satisfy Margie's curiosity about herself or her people's past. She knows where she might be able to get the other side of the story, though: the reservation. Being the willful and clever girl that she is, Margaret eventually finds her way free to explore the reservation. When she is 12 years old is when she first ventures on the reservation where she was born. It was a day that she remembered as clear as if it had happened yesterday when she told me of it when I was 8. Her dad was away on one of his masonry projects in North Texas. Grandma had had a little too much to drink after lunch. That would be the time that Margie could make good her escape. She had been waiting for this opportunity for as long as she could remember. Just last year, she'd gotten a bike for her birthday. Well, she was going to put it to good use now. She got on the bike, pointed it in the direction of the reservation. She had put on one of her best dresses, combed her hair neatly, and even used her father's shoe buff to clean her Sunday shoes. Margie wanted to look her best when she met her mother's people for the first time. It took Margie more than 2 hours to ride out to the reservation. She passed long stretches of road with nothing on the horizon for miles, just cactus and sand. It was an hour or so before dusk when Margie reached the edge of the reservation. She was confused. There was just a sign and a rusty half-standing wire fence that tells you that you are leaving the United States of America and entering the Apache Nation Reservation. Why were there no guard posts or soldiers posted here? From what she had read and been told, these were very dangerous and heathen people. As she processed this thought, she found herself inside the reservation. Shock. That is what Margie felt when she rode onto the reservation. Her mouth fell open, and her pedaling slowed to a stop. Never before in her life had she imagined what she saw before her. Yes, there were people in colored native clothing, but they were of poor quality and not well maintained. As well, there were shanty houses instead of the beautiful wigwams she had imagined. There was raw sewage running down the side of the streets, and the smell was making her sick to her stomach. Just as her stomach began to toss and turn, she noticed several of the, how shall we say, less savory people in the street approaching her. They were Native Americans wearing dirty and worn white people's clothes. She starts to back up on her bike when she hears mumbling in Apache. Suddenly, her regress is halted. Someone has come up behind her and stopped her bike. She looks over her shoulder to see a very tall, very thin, very old Indian with brilliant eyes and beautifully adorned hair. She was making note of his clothing, native and with many symbols and marking on it, when two things happened. First, she felt the warm and firm embrace of the large hands of the Indian behind her. Second, was the dirt clod that smashed into her freshly cleaned and ironed Sunday dress. "Half-breed, we know what you are, Margaret!" This yell had come from the Indians blocking her way forward. There is more shouting from those in front of her, most of it in Apache. She does not understand what's being said, but she's certain it is not nice. More clods of mud and dirt strike her as the crowd in front of her grows closer. Fear and confusion are flowing over her in waves. She falters on her bike, begins to cry, when she hears a deep and fluid voice speak behind her. It's the man that holds her. She cannot understand his words, but she can tell he is reproachful to the Indians in front of her. There are more screams of half-breed and yelling in native tongue, and then suddenly she feels she being lifted up, bike and all. "It is time for you to go, my little sparrow. My heart is filled with joy at seeing you, and sadness for what you see and hear today." It is the voice of the large Indian behind her. He has lifted her and her bike, turned them around, and faced her back down the street, facing out of town. He was very strong, but very gentle. He smells of leather, fresh air, and campfires. Nothing like the Indians she passed in town. There is something haunting her in his cell, in his smell. Something familiar. The large Indian has set her safely on the road, as dirt clods and garbage strike her. Carefully he leans over to her ear, still shielding her from the angry Indians, and he whispers in her ear, "It is time for you to go, my little sparrow." He says again, "Do not judge your people by the action of these few haters, little sparrow. There is love for you among your people, just not here and not now." The people that had been in front of her are now right behind the old Indian, and fear begins to grip her again. She feels the Indian gently push her down the bike, down the road, and hears the Indian say, "Now, little sparrow, fly, pedal your bike quickly, and go home." Margie pedaled her bike as quick as her legs could, faster and faster, faster than she'd ever pedaled before. Behind her, she hears yelling and arguing, and above it all, the deep voice of the Indian that had just saved her from a fate she dare not imagine. In Tale 2. This brings us to the end of today's special episode. I am recording the video of me reading this as you are reading. Well, actually, I'm doing it right now. I will get through post, and publish it as quickly as possible, and hopefully it will be ready by the end of the day. Well, I don't know. It's, what time? It's 5 p.m. in California, 7 in Pearland. It'll be up tomorrow. So look forward to the video that I'm making tomorrow. So again, everybody, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you so much for all your support, your kindness, your contributions, your phone calls, your emails, comments. Thank you for everything. It's helped me a lot, and not just the money. So as always, thank you. Thank you for your kindness and support, and may God bless.